Good afternoon. Thank you all, and certainly thank you. I'll echo what Senator Bach said about thanking the governor for allowing us to use this space as well. I think it was easier for you, and that was the goal. So, and maybe before I begin, I'll just echo what he said about trying to make life easier as we go through the legislative session. I was in the Capitol this morning, and it is really torn up. So, whatever we can do to make everybody's life easier, certainly reach out to me if we can be helpful in that. So. As to the forecast, obviously there are some signs on its face that look good, but as you dig a little deeper, there are some things that are concerning about the forecast. It is certainly the first time in a while that we've seen the revenues forecasted lower now than they were the last time around. We hope that's not a trend, and we see the economy turning back south. We've been talking an awful lot about that out on the campaign trail this last summer, and we know that Minnesota families really haven't seen the sort of economic benefit or surplus in their own family budgets, and this is something that really is concerning. And we know that that's what drives Minnesota's economy. So I agree with Commissioner Showalter that this isn't necessarily what we would call a rosy economic outlook for the state, but this is just a preliminary look for us. We will set our budget off of the February numbers. So some of the things I'm concerned about, not just that, the fact that they're downgrading the revenues in the 16-17 biennium, but also that the wage growth has been downgraded as well. I think that's concerning, and really knowing that it's that wage growth and Minnesotans that drive the economy, that really is a concerning thing as well. So we want to make sure that we return our priority back to Minnesota families. I've talked an awful lot about that on the campaign trail with folks throughout the summer. We know that's important to them. They need to see wage growth in their own budgets, and that's going to help the state as well. But as we work through this next budget, we're going to prioritize the things that I've talked about all along. We're going to prioritize seniors, veterans, and those most vulnerable in our society. We're going to put a priority on roads and bridges. We're going to put a priority on education and specifically closing the achievement gap. And most of all, we're going to put a priority on growing Minnesota's economy. And that's what I'm afraid of with this economic forecast. So we really want to make sure that we're growing wages for Minnesotans and growing Minnesota's economy. So, Senator.
Thank you, and thank you for being here. To me, it's a little bit of a disconnect to be in here, this room and hear the presentation from Commissioner Showalter and the governor and the sort of celebration that we've got the state budget flush again, and our budget is in great shape and great news. I'm not so sure that the families in Minnesota are feeling that their budgets are flush. I think they're worried about rising healthcare costs. I think they're worried about how to make ends meet as they face Christmas season. I think there's a lot of concern, and it seems to me that there's a lot of emphasis on the part of the majority and the governor. How do we grow the state budget? How do we make it bigger? How do we collect more revenue? How do we raise more taxes? We just had $2.5 billion tax increase and massive spending increases, and now we've got a surplus, and we're already talking about raising more taxes. I think it raises some real concern. We should not be focused on how to grow the state budget, but we should focus on how to grow the economy. I hope that as a part of this discussion we have, and I think the governor seemed to be open to it, that we talk about real comprehensive tax reform with a view of trying to create the conditions that will allow economic growth. I think we've all heard the anecdotal stories, and I think we see some things in this budget forecast that give suggestions that people maybe are not looking at Minnesota as the most friendly place for investment. People are packing their bags to leave the state to go other places. We want to send a message that maybe you should delay doing that, stay here, let's get our tax policies right, let's do some real reform and see if we can create economic growth. I look forward to working with the new majority in the House and with the governor to see if we can accomplish that.
Thank you. Well, what I think these numbers show is that hardworking Minnesota taxpayers have been overtaxed. And it's not reflected, though, in their own pocketbooks. So while the state is growing its budget, hardworking Minnesotans aren't feeling that at home. We can see that through the slow wage growth, through the fact that the economy's outlook is weakened. And so I find it interesting that there have been reports already of plans by some of my colleagues on the other side on how they want to spend every last dime of the budget surplus. And I think we need to be cautious. And the message that we sent when we were campaigning is that we wanted to come and bring balance to Minnesota. So I think we have to be very cautious when we move forward. And the framework that we will use is that we're going to look at our needs. We're going to find out what they cost. And then we'll create our budget, as opposed to just, coming forward and say, this is how we're going to spend every last dime of the surplus. Because frankly, as Senator Hand said, we want to focus on growing the economy and not just focusing on growing the state government as been done in the last couple of years. Thank you.
Questions?
Speak about Senator Bach just said that he didn't see any room in the surplus to fund roads and bridges in the general fund. Do you agree with that? And how else do you think we can fund?
This is obviously something that's been talked an awful lot about. It's something that I think will be a very important issue this next session. Our members are really ready to roll up their sleeves and dig into it. I think what we need to do is before we assume that the only answer is to increase the gas tax or some other new revenue, let's really dig into the problem, see what's causing it. I know that we're spending more money on transportation right now than we ever have in the state's past. Where are we spending it? Where is it going? How are we spending it? And are we being the best stewards with tax dollars that we can be? Let's look at everything before we make those determinations. And I know we've got a little bit of time to do that, but I know those are going to be some of the most important issues this session. But our members are really ready to roll up their sleeves and work on it.
Could you see, Mr. Speaker, any situation under which your caucus might agree to some form of revenue increase for transportation?
I have said all along, and while I don't think that a gas tax is the answer, and I don't think that it's likely, I have said all along that every option's on the table. And the reason I say that is it would be disingenuous for me to say we're going to dig in, analyze the problem first, and then come up with the best solution. Maybe that is the best solution. I don't think that it is. It's right now incredibly unpopular with the public. And frankly, over the last 2 years, Democrat policies have taken more and more money out of family budgets, and increasing the gas tax only furthers that. And believe me, this is a really important issue to me. I come from a district that really was, and I know I've told you this before, really was a boom and a bust. When times were great in Minnesota, things in my district, we had some of the highest growth rates in the country, new housing starts, those sorts of things. And during the downturn, we had some of the highest foreclosure rates in the country. And I feel like one of the biggest differences was the fact that much of my area, it's a bedroom community, and they commute into the cities. So, adding more to their budgets and gasoline, that was over a time, remember, when gas went from $2 a gallon to $4 a gallon. And it made it unbearable, and it found the breaking point for many of those family budgets. So we're going to look really close before we make any of those kind of decisions. Taking more money out of the economy and out of family budgets isn't driving good economic growth. And I think the bottom line is that's what we can see today from this forecast.
Mr. Speaker, why is it so hard to say that Minnesota's economy is doing pretty good and the state's in good shape right now, looking at this budget forecast?
Sure. I mean, we can look through the numbers at the end of session. I mean, literally at the last revenue forecast, the surplus was $2.599 billion. Okay, when the Democrats were done with that at the end of session, it was somewhere between $570 and $602 million. So that was our baseline today. Today, that's improved. What looks like in the 16-17 biennium about $90 million, but not because revenues have increased, because spending is projected to be less. Revenues have actually been downgraded by about $400 million in the next biennium.
So
that's a concerning trend.
Job that the legislature and the governor did.
Well, I mean, I look back to what happened. I mean, we had an unbelievable economic growth and recovery of the state's economy during the Republican budget. That's without question. I mean, we had $3.4 billion worth of surplus revenue as a result of that budget. Today, now we're downgrading what was projected to be we're downgrading the revenue by about $400 million in the tails. That's undeniable. It's the first time, I think, in probably 8, 9, 10 revenue forecasts where we've seen an actual downgrade in future revenues. So as I said when I started, I hope that's not a trend, but there are things to be concerned about in this revenue forecast.
Did Majority Leader Bach suggested that you might try to fast track some sort of tax conformity bill? Are your caucuses on board with that, and how far do you want it to go?
Well, I think, and Senator Hand can jump in here too, I think we're certainly going to take a look at that. There were, Democrats over the last 2 years stopped short of full federal tax conformity. There were things that they didn't do that really would have helped Minnesota families. So we're certainly going to look at that. We know it's important. We know the timeliness of it is important as we approach tax season. So I can't guarantee that it'll happen because I'm just one guy, but I think that it certainly will be a priority for us, and I'll let Senator.
Yeah, I think we're going to certainly, depending on what they offer, but assuming they offer a tax cut in effect to conform with the federal tax code, I think members of our caucus would certainly support that. As I said, I think we all believe on our side that we should be looking at comprehensive tax reform with the view of trying to make our economy stronger. We don't buy into the fact that, or the argument that by spending more money at the state level and raising more taxes, that somehow translates to economic growth. We don't believe that. We don't think this budget supports that. So we are very interested in finding ways to make sure that people in the state get to keep their money to spend on their priorities, not on what the state thinks is a priority.
Mr. Speaker, you emphasized this revenue projection downgrade. How does your caucus want to solve that problem and the wage stagnation, I guess?
Well, I look at the last two bienniums as kind of a night and day difference on how tax policy can affect Minnesota's economy. When we took over, literally when I was sworn in here for the first time, we faced about a $6 billion budget deficit. We balanced that without raising taxes, and we knew Minnesota's economy was going to recover. We're not going to take credit for that. It was recovering already. That recovery had started, but we knew that taking more money out of the budgets of Minnesota families was going to hurt the economy. Fast forward, Democrats chose to implement one of the largest tax increases in state history, really at a time when we were arguing that was unnecessary. And what we've seen now is that we haven't seen the sort of economic growth that we really hoped. That trend hasn't continued. So that's what's concerning to me, and I hope that it hasn't turned back the other direction. But for Speaker Thiessen to stand up here and say that the economy or the recovery hasn't flatlined, I think we're not looking at the numbers. Today we're downgrading the revenue by $400 million in the next biennium. That's concerning. If we spend all of this money, it will not be a good fiscal situation for the state of Minnesota.
And to reverse that situation, which you say is current, what are you proposing? Do you want to see business taxes reduced?
Well, we're gonna probably look at everything, but we need to figure out a way. I truly believe that it's the budgets of Minnesota families that drive our economy, and it's their jobs, job growth, wage growth. It's those things that drive Minnesota's economy, and we need to put tax policy in place that will be helpful to them, put more money in the budgets of Minnesota families. So those are the policies we're going to look at.
So you're talking about tax credits for individuals, or
could be,
or possibly income tax reductions for some individuals?
I think we'll look at everything, but I think we need to analyze we've just seen these numbers for a few hours. Of course, these are the preliminary ones. We're going to see the February forecast. Once we have a little better grasp on is there really a trend here and what might be causing that trend, we can put some stopgaps in place or some incentives in place to help get the economy growing.
If there were income tax reductions in the mix, would you advocate that they be across the board, or would they be targeted more heavily toward the job creators, as we say, in other words, basically the fourth bracket or upper bracket?
Are we going to cut taxes for the rich? And I think that really everything is we need to analyze everything, and I don't know that we can derive that any one thing is causing revenues to be downgraded. But we'll certainly look at that. I think we need to make sure that we're looking at things that will help all Minnesotans, and that's really where we're going.
Haven't you argued in the last campaign that the tax hike on the job creators is responsible for dragging the economy down? Therefore, you've got the money, you could reduce those taxes.
It potentially can. I know I spoke with the governor here in the last few weeks, and he himself said that he would be open to cutting the corporate income tax. Certainly we need to understand that if we make it more difficult for job creators to create jobs in Minnesota, we're going to end up with less jobs. I mean, there is definitely a reaction when you change policy like that. So let's incentivize job growth. Let's incentivize wage growth for Minnesota families. That's what we want to focus on.
That tax hike on the highest income Minnesotans.
I don't know if that would accomplish what we want to, but we'll certainly look at that.
What about overall? I asked Governor Dayton if $1 billion surplus just makes governing easier, and he said, yeah, this means session should get done on time, and we shouldn't have a shutdown again. Can you guarantee those things?
I think it probably does. I've been saying all along, I don't see any reason that we would have a shutdown. I hope nobody's talking about that. I think this does make our job easier. I mean, we've just come through a long period of deficits, and the recovery obviously started back in 2010, and we had a very strong recovery for the first portion of that. We certainly want that to continue. I very sincerely believe that Minnesota families aren't seeing the full benefit of this economic recovery, and we really want Minnesota's economy to grow, and we want Minnesota families to feel that. So that's where our focus is going to be. As far as how we'll get along and we'll work together, I think this probably does make our job easier. And I think as long as we all are willing to sit down, work on the problems that Minnesota families and Minnesotans want us to work on, and find solutions that are going to help them, we're going to get out of here on time, and we'll have a successful session.
Looks like you got a new due.
I do. And before we go, I just want to say that the best communications director in the House GOP caucus has a birthday today. So please join me in wishing Susan Klossmore a happy birthday. Anything else? Thank you all.